There's something legitimately special about Stranger Things, the show that has been broken down and talked about ever since its massive release on Netflix in 2016, with countless spoiler casts and Easter egg videos seemingly dissecting the entire series. But I truly think that that's the least interesting part about the show. Within this exterior of an homage to 80s films and blatant references, there's this golden sense of storytelling that I believe is absolutely universal and appealing to us all. And I can't understate the word universal. The show is an absolute powerhouse of popularity with an estimated 21.4 million viewers for the first season within the first few months of its release. It became Netflix's third largest show on the service at the time. That's a big deal considering the lineup of amazing shows Netflix has to offer. So why is this particular show so popular? Well, most will point to its use of nostalgia, but I don't buy that, at least not fully. Sure, it's obvious that Stranger Things is completely inspired by 80s pop and nerd culture. It's baked into every fabric of the show, including arguably its most important piece, the setting. The small fictional area of Hawkins, Indiana is ripe with kids playing in the streets, tall trees, and nice houses, and it plays the role of a typical suburban town perfectly, until it doesn't need to anymore. With any town or area, there's myths and legends of secrets lurking around every corner, adventure in a place of pure normality, and I think that that's an important cornerstone of nostalgia. This idea of going back to a simpler time where the air was pure and life was exciting is definitely reminiscent of countless movies like The Goonies. Part of the reason we look back at these properties so fondly is because they represent youth, a time where we worried about monsters under our bed and riding bikes with our friends, and not bills and job security. It's a time we all miss deep down and we fight to feel again as we grow older. And you get that same feeling in the setting. But then there's more obvious nostalgic bits, like the kids playing D&D, and the countless posters that, not so subtly, hint towards the thematic elements for the series. But even if D&D was never mentioned or a poster of the thing wasn't on Mike's wall, you'd still feel the sense of nostalgia, simply because of the way the show was shot. The entire series was shot digitally, but overlaid on top of it was film grain from 80s cameras. So this look and feel is absolutely purposeful, down to the most basic of details. The creative team's intent from the technical and story-based aspects was to make you feel nostalgic. All signs point to that. But there's much more to nostalgia than a general fond remembrance of our youth. From a very personal point of view, I've seen a lot of people that are watching Stranger Things also happen to be rather young enough to not grow up with Stephen King films in theaters or E.T. on VHS. The properties that are seemingly the driving force behind the show are not necessarily connected to fond memories inside people's heads. For me, I didn't grow up with those films, but I still feel this massive love and adoration for everything going on around the show. So if it isn't nostalgia, then what is it? Well, I look at Stranger Things as a remix. Of course, the show is its own beautifully crafted piece of art, but it's undeniable how its creation was brought about through pure inspiration. Every frame of the show is this expertly written love note to all of 80s film and culture, so much so that it becomes a problem for some. But I never saw it as such, because they do it right. The Duffer Brothers didn't succumb to 2 seasons of winks and head nods to pop culture using it as a storytelling crutch. They instead took the best parts of their favorite movies, books, and properties and maneuvered it into the series. The 80s aesthetic, the monster, the kids, the protection of Eleven, these are all things that in theory and on paper are clear-cut examples of homages, and they're all inspired by massively popular pieces of work. Yet in the context of the show, it feels refreshingly new. It isn't a remake or reboot of an already existing franchise or a quick knockoff. The series takes the best ideas of amazing art, then changes and molds it into the best possible form. Sure, you have the character tropes like the cool kid, the frantic mother, the no-nonsense police chief, but each of these parts of the puzzle are tweaked to overcome the characterization of a used and tired character. They rise to the occasion when needed, all of which becoming memorable roles for their depth and motivations, and not just for being another 80s movie cliche. The same can go for any other part of the show. For instance, the entire plot is very similar to E.T. mixed with It, a group of kids trying to find their missing friend while also harboring a person of interest from government hands. But the story has a lot of twists and turns within the seemingly overdone frame that make it something original. No, Stranger Things doesn't do everything perfectly. It has problems, but the way it handles influences is beautiful because it's refined, and it only leaves room for the best of the best. It's like an 80s movie highlight reel with compelling characters. And with all that said, Stranger Things is absolutely fantastic, and the way that it handles handled borrowing ideas from classics somehow made the appeal broader, in turn making the series even more special, and having people experience a sense of nostalgia even when they didn't grow up in that era. It's a period piece at heart, but one with more cinematic references than historical, and that's perfect. The Duffer Brothers and the team behind the show did it all by respecting the source material and forcing themselves to try and improve on it, and not just use it to make a quick buck.